You're listening to the Talking Forest podcast with your host, Kendra Burns. In today's world, it's important to communicate your story online, and Kendra can help you by diving into social media and providing you with free tips and insights on how to build your organic social media following and shine online. Having been raised low income, first in her family to go to college, and a proud international military spouse, Kendra develops creative media content across many social media platforms from anywhere in the world. Her inspiration comes from the people who give her hope and believe in her so she can believe in you. Follow the Talking Forest podcast today to see how she lives the dream of a traveling virtual entrepreneur and get your tech tips as we keep up with the latest on social media.
Hi, and welcome to the Talking Forest podcast. This is your host, Kendra Burns. I'm super excited to have Joe Buck on today. He's actually with his own podcast and live fireside chats with Joe Buck in Nature. And I've been talking with him on Twitter. Really excited to bring this episode to you. This will be episode 62, and we are here to talk about some awesome things. He has a niche that he's in, dendrochronology, that some people may know about in this audience and some people may not. So I'm just super excited to dive in and was going to see what things we can learn today. So awesome, Joe. If you would like to introduce yourself, let us know about your background, where you're from, and how you got started in the dendrochronology and forestry sector.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks, Kendra, for having me on. I love Talking Forest. You do great work, and it's an honor to be here. Yeah, so my name is Joe Buck, and I kind of go by the moniker of Joe Buck in Nature. That's my Twitter and Instagram, where I put out content. So my main focus is on education and science communication for trying to link, scientists with non-scientists. And yeah, so I do the fireside chats with Joe Buck in Nature. I post everything on YouTube and on my website. Yeah, so that's mostly geared towards just having conversations with some pretty amazing scientists in the field. Mostly it's with ecologists from various, fields of study. Yeah, that's kind of what it's been geared to so far. And we just kind of have a sit down chat like you would around a fire, just it's virtual. So at least for right now it is. So I do that. And then also I run my own dendrochronology dendro consultancy called Cross Timbers Dendro. And that's based out of Edmond, Oklahoma. It's named that because I live in the Cross Timbers ecoregion that's mostly blackjack and post oaks. And so I'll help people find out how old their trees are. Also talk about like management strategies that, will kind of attain the goals that they're looking for, whether that's for wildlife management or it's forest management directly, or whatever it is that they're looking for. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I'm also finishing up a master's degree. Just got the writing left to do of the thesis, and which I just slowly peck away at. But one day we'll get there, and I'll have that illness after my name too. But no worries. It'll come when it comes. But so that's a bit about me.
Awesome. That's exciting. And I'm really happy that you're that consultant that can go out and help people with their trees. There's a lot of people out there that have trees and land that don't know the value, don't know the worth, and may not even know the species. And so to have you out there as a non-traditional forester, but more of a person that can help them with their succession planning and help them with species, help them with wildlife. I think that's amazing that you're out there doing that.
Yeah, I love to do it. It's fun for one. And, I understand too, that that's quite a privilege. I've definitely worked in many jobs that weren't that fun, quote unquote. But this one it's a joy to get to be in the trees every day, that I am in the trees anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's why Talking Forest was created. And the only time I really get to go in the field is when I travel. So I've traveled all over the world and been able to document tree towers, been able to document old forests, and the Washington State area that I grew up in kind of fostered that environment of here's an ecosystem that's got mountains, rivers, lakes, and streams. And I said, well, I was born into this. Why don't I just continue this, especially since it's a passion? And so that's really cool that you get to go out there. And my favorite thing is to work with consultants that are field-based, so that someday I might be able to go out in the field with them as well and see some of that and tell the story of what you're seeing, from the public side and from the consultant side.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you said to tell the story, because, that's what is so intriguing to me about the kind of niche field of dendrochronology. You get to literally see the tree rings, which do tell the story, depending on what variables there are, was this tree in kind of, was it, a very wet year that year, or was it, did it have a string of drought years, or was it under particular stress by beetles, or, the tree rings do tell that story. They tell the story of fire on the landscape over, the past. And, yeah, it's a written record, literally, in the tree rings. And yeah, I mean, it's all about storytelling, isn't it? And I feel like trees are really, and of course there's like other proxies that help tell stories, but of nature, but trees are my chosen branch, so to speak.
Yeah, and I can absolutely see why. They have these stories inside of them. And that was when I was core boring, I believe, in Grace Harbor College. It was part of our field lab that we had, which I'm grateful that was a thing where you could touch, see, feel, and use all your senses in the woods. And I think I went that path because of some of the mental disabilities that I've been, dealing with just now. I didn't know I had all of that. And all I knew was I needed to be able to use all of my senses in my job so that I could be myself. And so that's really cool that, you have also had some of that background that's not very easy to talk about, and being undiagnosed and later in our age, learning about that. I think our chosen careers have actually helped us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, definitely background, as far as my memory serves, of having, undiagnosed mental illness. I have lots of comorbids, and so I could spend many chats on many different topics when it comes to that. But among them being OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder is my probably primary one that I talk about most, and bipolar disorder, depression, Tourette syndrome. So these things are they're difficult to navigate in kind of your stereotypically normal jobs. For me, I've been able to cope and been able to manage, under the radar, I think, in most cases. But what that does is it comes at a detriment to me as a person. Whenever I'm having to hold in tics, for instance, with my Tourette syndrome, the whole time, like, I'm focusing on running the background is don't have a tic, don't do your tics. And that detracts from my ability to be fully present and give my best self. And at the same time, I may not just be holding back tics, but I'm also having lots of intrusive thoughts from obsessive compulsive disorder. And, whenever you're sitting there just trying to stay present or listen to the person talking, that brings a lot of difficulties, for sure. But what's so amazing is to be a field-based person. I love communication. I love talking with people, despite, the things that I just, mentioned about what goes on in my head. I love doing that. And I love being able to bring those stories to life for people. I love to connect them to what the land is telling them, what, if they have certain goals to meet. It's amazing to get to work with people to do that. And being outside really helps me manage that. It helps me manage a lot of the stress and distress that comes from the disorders. It's pretty cool to be in the field of any kind of nature-based job.
I know, it's so amazing. And there's so many people. I have groups on Facebook that are women outdoors, outdoor camp, I think, is one that I follow, that people have been switching careers from your typical cubicle positions to be outside. And some people actually, I'm shocked by this, have the education, but there's a gap there with getting them into a job, because historically this industry has been seasonal. And when you face adversity in finance situations like I did, I couldn't afford to be in seasonal positions. So I made up for it by being a waitress, by being a personal banker. And I fell back on that until I finally blew up and, like you said, wasn't taking care of myself. So I didn't know that that teller environment for me was slowly degrading my health to the point of I couldn't talk to 50 people in a day. And so that's about the time where I was offered a career in forest policy, and I switched my careers from personal banking out of just out of college to back into my education that I got on purpose. You know, it's so divine thinking about looking back going, wow, I was meant to be in the forest field sector in some way and to impact people. And now with Talking Forests, I can do that in any way I want and still be able to survive and live and be fruitful and have those boundaries. And it's just been amazing that someone like you I can talk to openly about, you know, being able to, like you said, have these things going on in your head even when you're in the field, but the field kind of helps you balance that out. And I know when I go for a walk that instantly I'm definitely mood boosted. I'm a completely amazing person, and you can kind of fall back into yourself. So just going for walks, being in the trees, touching the trees, dendrochronology, going in and boring trees to see some stories and everything like that is just super important. And I think that people want this industry so bad, but there's a lot of barriers to entering that I would like in Talking Forests to help mitigate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. God, yeah. I mean, that resonates with me for sure. I think, like so much of the mitigation is it's held back by our unwillingness to confront, taboo topics and, the stigma around mental health or any disadvantages that a person may bring just by the inherent, self that they happen to be born as, whether it's being a person of color, being a woman in the workplace, being, non-binary or LGBTQ plus, like any of these things that a person brings as their authentic self has not historically been allowed, frankly,
Right.
and has certainly been discouraged, at best. And fortunately, I do certainly feel like my background is in oil and gas. That's kind of my roots is in the oil and gas industry, and that's certainly not immune to discrimination in the workplace. It has a lot of parallels with forestry in that it's traditionally a male dominated field. Steel is a male dominated field, and I know, like, in talking to you in the past, it's every aspect has really been male dominated, from accounting, HR. These are issues that have been women haven't even been in those positions sometimes in forestry and in oil and gas. It's way more inclusive than it used to be, but it still has a long way to go for sure.
It does, and that's been really hard for me to watch as a person that had adversity from the beginning and trying to enter and put my foot in the door. I had to do it in non-conventional ways that people don't even understand because it wasn't normal. And so that's a great point that you just made. My least favorite thing to watch on social media is when someone posts a boardroom full of males and there's a woman there taking notes in a chair that's not even at the table. And there's a lot of times where I am not afraid to speak up, and I may say something to the effect of, why is she taking minutes on the side? Can she at least sit at the table? And I'm also in that trying to say that she should also be in a position at the table, leading in some way. And there's a lot of people who think mentorship and whatnot, but mentorship has helped historically, but we also need to be opening those doors and giving those people that are passionate and are themselves, no matter what that is, a seat at the table, also within the leadership sections and committees, making decisions, being a part of rulemaking, all of those things. And it's definitely going to be a rough road, and I'm already having a really hard time going out as a normal looking female with my service animal because they just see a girl and her dog, and no, not anymore. It's just not like that anymore for me. It's general anxiety disorder, complex PTSD, and needing him to take me out from a hyperactive mindset.
Yeah. No, definitely. There's definitely, so much work to be done. And I think this is such a great platform to kind of start that work. Unfortunately, if you look through history, for sure, mentorship is great. Sponsorship is great. But I mean, it really takes, people being a little bit radical in the sense of speaking up for themselves. Unfortunately, it was, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. Yeah, but like those are the ones that we know of.
Yeah.
But it was Black people had to bleed and die for their own freedoms, unfortunately, because historically it was the white people who led the suppression. And same with what I think is a really big theme that needs to be talked about more in forestry is the role of Indigenous people. It's because we're talking about, and oil and gas too, we're talking about the land. These are the fruits of the land, right? And nature's gonna have it there because it's been there for millions of years, the way that evolution has put it. And but there were stewards here before European settlers came and colonized these lands. And now look who's making the decisions still. It's well past time for the boardrooms to have people of color and especially those Indigenous voices on their native lands.
Prescribed burning in the prairies. That's what Indigenous people did. We have gapped so far out that yes, wildfire is something we're going to have to live with because we didn't continue the Native American traditions of prescribed burning lands with safety. And so that's something that I learned about in Mima Mounds of Thurston County. And I did a GIS project of layers of years that they had burned prairie, and it came back with diversity of seeds that were sitting in a seed bank that you didn't even know were going to bloom, but they bloomed after fire. And so those are just things as something I learned in school that I am now passionate about, that I am working with Talking Forests, I can talk about as a story and let people know that that was something that we've completely missed in the past 100 years because of not speaking to Indigenous peoples. So that's really cool. And then the program that I went into in Grace Harbor College actually expanded 2 years ago to a BAS in forest management. So you can go to a community college in Washington State and walk away with a BAS, Bachelor's in Applied Science. So you can walk away with a bachelor's degree now. I was the first part of that program. I got 2 AA degrees out of it. And they actually now work and partner with the Quinault Indian tribe, which is why I exist, is because my grandfather was a fisherman, specifically a gill netter on the coast, and where his boat usually sat was in Chanus Creek, which is right next to the Quinault tribe. So he kept my family alive 2 generations ago via seafood, and they were in poverty. And so that's why I'm from the Seattle area, is because of him. you really look at, and I'm really interested to kind of digitize some of the photos and tapes from his career days in the 60s and 50s, because he was able to actually trade with the Quinault tribe. And that's all I know. And I know that I think his boat name was the Moonbeam. And then I end up being born a moon child. So my entire birth and being we just had the pink full moon on April 26th, and that was my birthday. So a lot of what I do is nature followed, and I'm an earth sign, and then in astrology, I'm in the sun and all this stuff. And so it has built up to what we see now in Talking Forests. And I think it's just amazing to think about. Now we're sitting here on a digital platform talking about it and just openly, changing lives as we speak. One of the questions I have is, what has been your biggest accomplishment thus far?
My biggest accomplishment is honestly supporting my wife in her endeavors, mentally and emotionally, and just being there, because she's the breadwinner in our family. She's the one that, really brings home the money and, the financial support that we need. Being there for the kids, we have, we kind of did a career swap before I went back to school. So my background is in business. That's what I got my first bachelor's in. And it wasn't till, I don't know, like 7 years or so of kind of managing businesses and doing that kind of work that I went back to school and got a bachelor's in science. And then started my master's to do the program that I'm in now. So when we did that career swap, I think my proudest achievement is just being able to support my wife and furthering her career, because she's, frankly, she's just way better than I am at like anything. And I'm glad she's not competing with me, because she'd be a much better scientist and business owner. But no, yeah, I think it would be that. Yeah, my family is my proudest achievement. But if I am to speak, obviously, I'm beating around the bush because it's hard for me to talk about myself. But if I am to talk about myself, I would say my proudest achievement is outreach. I'm a pretty newly minted Talk Saves Lives trainer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I also volunteer and have volunteered for other groups as well. My advocacy work on just social media, which is just, a guy putting out stuff out there, to hopefully normalize and
right.
Be relatable. I'm really proud of that. Like, a business is great. I'm proud of my resiliency to, face adversity and, still do something. But I would really say, my proudest individual achievement is just creating safe spaces for people so that they can really shine and try to be their best version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And just working with people that need it so much. And there's also people out there, and I found this out myself, some people that didn't know they needed those services, and reaching out to get services and the outreach that you're doing is amazing. And I have survived off of utilizing resources on not only in my high school, but my college campuses, and those offices that provided a safe space for people who were diverse really helped me with funding, helped me through moments of my undiagnosed ADHD when I really needed to focus on a project, and I would try to do it at the last minute. And I was so focused on getting perfect grades that, I would beat myself up for getting a B. And they would say, Kendra, you're well on your way to getting a good score. You'll be fine. They would tell me how to reach my goals and help me. And so, those are the kind of things that I've really cherished. And so the fact that you're involved in saving people that way and showing them, hey, you're honored. That's okay. This is okay. We're all human. I think that's really helpful And people wonder, they see an able-bodied person at the surface, but what they don't know is that, we have things going on and things that are kind of in the background, and that safe place is needed to discuss the nuances of some of these disabilities.
Yeah, no, for sure. What I can see on my house, we have a sign above it that I bought not too long ago, I guess. Well, I guess about 3 years, and it says "You are safe here," and that is like my biggest thing. I fully acknowledge that. I think we're all a bunch of just vessels walking around, projecting onto other vessels like ourselves.
Yes.
And for me, like my biggest thing was, growing up, I was undiagnosed, like I said, and OCD is, God, it's such just, it's a tormentor. It, like, you're living with a part of your brain that is, just doesn't work right. It's like that link between the amygdala, fear center, and the frontal lobe is like a loose door. It's just constantly allowing these little logical scenarios to enter your fear zone, and so it just basically makes like everything a big deal. And so like growing up, like I just didn't ever feel safe. And if I go into it doesn't matter if it's a restaurant, a gas station, somebody else's house, my own house. It doesn't matter. Like there is a worst case scenario that I have to solve right then. It's urgent, right? And so, now that I have therapy, I'm very privileged, to have a counselor, have a therapist, have medication, and have amazing psychoeducation now that I really threw myself into, and doing a lot of work that, I live a very stable life, and I been relatively stable, but it's just been, like you said, it's an invisible thing. It's something that I live with. It's happening here, and it's messing with me. And it does spill out into the lives of others. But yeah, I think, for sure, like a safe space is what I'm always trying to project, and what I have my whole life. With hindsight, I see that now. But yeah, having a safe space is everything.
Well, I didn't know, but I was in and out of several different daycares, and I was in and out of several different neighbors' homes. And reflecting on it, I did have a therapist that I used to have in Germany. She asked me, who took care of you? And she was right, but a lot of the people that raised me were non-biological, and I was raised by a village. So that's why when I landed in Germany, not only being super direct because I'm disabled, but just the way that they raise their kids now is via a village. So the way that it works in Germany is you drop off a kid to a park, which I had by my house. So I watched this actually play out. It was an experience of mine. I was out gardening, and I would always see these kids get dropped off, and I'm like, where's their parents? And the reason why they can do that is because they take accountability for every human being, no matter your background. And they will, if something were to happen, I asked my husband, so what if a medical emergency were to happen? He goes, oh, well, we'd call the ambulance. Of course, we'd call 112, not 911.
Yeah.
Different continent, right? So of course, we do our Good Samaritan thing. But in hindsight, there are people looking out of their Rolatins and like watching the neighborhood, and anything that would ever happen, everyone would take accountability for, and they would make each other accountable for the actions of each other, which is more collectivism than I'd ever experienced in my entire life. And what's crazy is that being raised by a village is okay. You don't have to be raised by a biological parent. And that's something that I've had to, like you said, with a counselor, therapist, and psychologist, and I had medication at one point, actually go through that as being acceptable. And I had to accept that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, childhood stuff is tough.
Yeah.
it definitely, I mean, like, we're each thing begets the next, and we're a product of our childhood. And then some, for some of us, we have to, we have to do a lot of work and digging and working at that. But yeah, for sure. No, I love that community aspect of,
Yeah,
raising children.
collectivism.
Yeah, no, it's very cool.
Yeah, so anyone can take care of anyone. And, to go back to tribalism, we are just people, you know. So we kind of go back to the roots there. So another question I have is, what is your favorite social media platform and why?
Oh, that one's pretty easy for me. So Twitter is like everything. Yeah, I love Twitter. So I know, like, everybody, you can talk bad about anything, of
Yeah.
course. And there's bad stuff about Twitter. I mean, like, it's a social media platform, so anybody can get on there and say whatever they want. And you can say a lot of really bad things and still not get banned from Twitter, And so I understand fully that, there's a lot of bad, but for me, in that kind of theme of making, safe places, safe spaces, is that's what I do for Twitter. Like, if it's not about disagreeing opinions that are in disagreement. It's really just anybody that's just combative, or anybody that's misogynistic, or bigoted. They're not on my Twitter feed. Like, they're gonna get banned. That's out. I'm just not part of it. But like, for me, I have so many amazing connections that I've made through Twitter, and the accessibility, it is amazing. Like, I now collaborate with a couple of people, internationally, that I wouldn't have been able to do that if it weren't for platforms like Twitter. LinkedIn as well. That's a good one that I like. But those platforms, especially Twitter, has been so amazing at getting ideas out there, sharing opinions, sharing research, or questions. Like, I had a question that Dr. Kristen DeGraw, she's a dendrochronologist that does a lot of work on historic buildings in West Virginia and kind of the Eastern Seaboard region. And she, yeah, I mean, like, she helped me find solutions to the problem that I had, and, she's an amazing scientist, and she has her own business. She's busy, she's doing stuff, but she took the time, to kind of help guide me on that. Same thing, like, yeah, there's, somebody I'm working with in Europe. There's somebody else that I'm kind of reaching out to in New Zealand. And, like, it's really amazing to be able to do that today. Like, it was just, people seem unreachable, right? Like, we have these big names in science, or big names in ecology for me, and forest people. And you're just like, oh man, wouldn't it be so cool, like, to chat with them or talk with them? Like, okay, yeah, it is. And so all you got to do is just, like, send them a message, and most people, in my experience, are cool people. I mean, like, again, that's because that's the space I created, and the one that I maintain and harvest, I guess.
In the end, we are all human.
Yeah, everybody's human. Yeah, like, I guess I had who was another big name, Tyson Swetnam. He said in his work, he works with, like, people with NASA and, all these astronomers and stuff. And he said, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we all have the same crappy, computer problems, or, something like that. It's true. Like, we all can relate if we're willing to. And so that's what I like about Twitter. That's, it's a platform. It's just like, here's my opinion and just a few characters, and, somebody else can shoot back. And I like that.
Yeah, it's super educational, and that's why I've been attracted to your safe place, because that's something I've been harboring as well, and needing myself for my newfound diagnoses. And it's been amazing to have those boundaries that you were talking about, with not allowing that negativity in those people. And that's what I say when I travel and do national, international conferences. The questions from the audience in the Q&A session, which I try to get on a recording so that people can hear it on YouTube, are usually, well, I thought Twitter was just bureaucratic. And it's like, yeah, if you want it to be, but I used it for good, and here's how I use it for good. And with my clients, the same thing. I'm not going to go and like all those people that are making these messages that are dehumanizing people. I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm holding, like you said, that I'm holding the light and making sure that people have that light and airy and good, authentic, not unicorns and rainbows, but because we're still human. But, you know, those places. And then Twitter also for me has been not only for my business, but also for consulting with others, that it's the most low maintenance. I can touch and go. Retweeting other people's tweets is actually easier than any other platform. And so if you back it with a content plan that you already have, let's say you put out some podcast content, you put out some of your, like you have your dendrochronology content, and then you just every once in a while retweet other people's tweets, you're going to grow exponentially, and that's organic.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I love that.
You're not asking anyone to do anything. And you're still garnering authentic people that want to talk about your content, and then people that retweet your content and you retweet their content. And then I noticed Twitter's actually, for me, they're the best at getting the most relevant content in front of you. As long as you're authentic with what you're engaging with, they actually show you. And every morning I go through my feed and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, retweet. Oh yeah. And I take, you know, I do a 1-sentence thing, like, I agree, same, you know, whatever. And like, it's just light and airy feeling comparatively. And that's because we've created that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is like a tailor. Each individual person, you know, tailor makes their Twitter feed, you know, and it becomes like a support group for me. And you know, that's why, you know, there's I love it. There was this one person who I'm sure, you know, a well-meaning person, and they're allowed to have their opinion, of course. And you know, and I understand where he's coming from, but he said, you know, like, you know, I got on Twitter, you know, so that we could have academic discussion, blah, blah, blah. And he got roasted, you know, because it was like, hey, you know, if we want to post like mental, because he was kind of, I think, like saying like, hey, you know, let's leave all the mental health stuff off. Let's leave like the advocacy and, you know, Black Lives Matter stuff off. And it was like, man, like what, you know, like if people want to express that, they can express it, and you don't have to follow it if you don't want to, you know. I choose to follow that, you know, things that I think Twitter and, well, other social media as well, but I do agree. I think Twitter really is such an authentic thing when it comes to, you know, look, these are opinions that are shared and go around. And because it's so easy to share them, and they have to be condensed, you know, like
really is.
you can't really wax on, you know, on Twitter. Like you got to like narrow it down. This is my point. These are my values. And if you see that people are agreeing with it, then hey, like these are my people. And if you see people being bigoted, then they're not my people, and they're going to get blocked. And so I love it. I love being able to have kind of this nexus of mental health advocacy work with the scientific advocacy, and seeing it all blend together, because like that's how people are going to feel supported and have a safe space.
Yeah, and even though I'm not in college, I love the academic chatter and the PhD stuff too, because I know I could get my master's and go further, but I'm just not there at this time. And people will push me to get my master's. I've been pressured to do so, but I know it's not my time for that right now, and that's okay. But I like seeing people who are in their master's programs. And the other historical thing in this field, especially that I noticed a trend internationally. So I've been to conferences in person in Poland, Oxford University, and Kentucky, California, Washington State, of course, where I'm from. And then I'm about to start doing the Appalachian range, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. Here's kind of the research trend I've been seeing is that there's all these research conferences for the people who know about research and for people who can understand that type of communication. But when I go to poster sessions and when I go into, there's really cool actually. One of my local SAF student chapters did a poster session on Zoom. So I got to go into all these classrooms and talk to students and kind of see how their research was going. And they were talking about macroinvertebrates and stormwater runoff, and my memories of all that. And in the 10 years I studied it just came back and just flooded my brain. And I was just on cloud nine with these students, and I was inviting them to things. And it was so cool. But what I'm noticing is that those conferences don't have very many people from the public, and their research presentations are understandable for that audience, but not for anyone else. And I actually have been targeted as a researcher. After I give a presentation, I've been asked to be publicized. And I've also had a really hard time with research conferences trying to get me to do a poster. And I don't think that's fair going forward, because I am a professional. I have been doing this for 6 years, and I am no longer a student. So I would like the safe space for people who are professional consultants in the niches that they're in to be able to come in and give a presentation without being asked to be published, because my abstract is basically what I'm going to talk about, but I don't have a research paper on social media. Sure. I'm not in a master's program to create a paper. And so that's been awkward for me too. And it was hard to draw boundaries. I've done it the past 3 years. I have been selected to do a poster presentation. And, the boundary that I create is I am a professional. This is an oral presentation. If I can't present it orally, I'm not going to be able to go to your conference.
Yeah.
I don't have a research paper.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like, there's a conference for everybody for sure. And you definitely sounds like you drew the boundaries that you needed to and say like, look, this is not my kind of thing. But maybe like this professional forester's one is, or, whatever, or a certain trade oriented or public oriented one for sure. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, academic conferences are very different.
Yes, they are.
They're for the academics. So, they're for researchers. So I think you're wise to, know what ones you want to fit into and then what ones you don't.
And I also tell them, hey, social media is not explained in writing. It's explained in doing and in presenting. And even a PowerPoint isn't suffice for it sometimes. So I know I'm pioneering an effort when this kind of thing happens, and I am not new to being either a Renaissance woman or a pioneer. That's something that I am comfortable in, and I'm comfortable being the exception.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you know yourself and the audience you're trying to appeal to. Yeah.
And whenever someone tries to plug well, you're different or you're a different situation, I'm like,
yeah.
So like, what's the big deal here? So what if I'm different? I'm a human. Everyone's different. So that's been really fun to model after. But now that we've gotten to know you a little bit and your favorite platform, let's kind of move into the last questions, which are more facing towards forests and wood, which you deal with in your business and hobby, dendrochronology. What are the major issues facing our forests and wood sector today?
Well, I'll speak to it from my angle, which is not, pure forestry or wood products either. I would say kind of the major thing that we have facing in my field of dendrochronology is representation in the field. It's historically been male dominated, and but for that's not to say that there weren't key women in the history of dendrochronology. There certainly were. But what's really nice now is we're having a lot more representation and to have women in the field. There are some amazing scientists, and lots of them as dendrochronologists now who are women. What we do have is a lack of diversity outside of white women and white men in the field. So I would say recruitment is key. We definitely need to see more because dendrochronology is certainly something that anybody can learn if they have the right mentor. Or there's not a lot of publicly accessible, other than books, there's not a lot of courses you can go to unless you're going through academic channels, which is totally fine to me, but it doesn't have to be so. But I would love to see more academics, more mentors, advisors taking on students, and not just taking them on, not sitting back, resting on their laurels, so to speak, waiting for them to come to them. I would love to see more mentorship and seeking out underrepresented people, because we have a lack of color, a lack of diversity, and it's not good. It needs to be more accessible, and it would be really nice to see steps in that, and there are. So I really like the work that the Tree Ring Society is doing. They a couple years back, they kind of put together a new executive council, kind of their committee, and how they're looking forward. And one of those was to create a DEI position on the council. And these are things like, okay, it's 2021. To have a DEI position is not like groundbreaking or anything like that, but it's something that was lacking for way too long, and they're doing something about it. So knowing that they're doing that, and there's some great people who are extremely well intentioned, and I know they put a lot of effort into what they're doing. So I'm really hopeful to see inclusion, diversity be kind of the next steps.
I think that's really fair for what you said about major issues facing this sector, and then niching into dendro. That's really important because there's a bunch of different niches within forestry and wood that people don't expect to learn about, but we're actually doing a lot more interdisciplinary learning in a lot of our colleges so that we can pick whatever we want to do. I actually worked, this is a little side note, but I worked in a college admissions office, and I worked my way up from the switchboard, which is where you plug in and get people to the right person on the desk, to all the way up to doing admissions applications. And I was the one who would review them, screen them, make sure they were complete, had the signatures, everything that they needed. And that was into my the last 2 years of my 2-year degree, when I was doing that on top of my forestry program. And I realized that people were putting undecided. And at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, undecided, like, how could this be a thing? And, then I started to accept it. And I was like, no, there are people in the world who go into education and they haven't tried enough or done enough things to know what they want. So undecided means that they're probably going to go into an AA degree and then pick something eventually, but you don't have to major in minor. And that's what I loved about Evergreen State College, was that it wasn't a GPA system. So we did essays of how we thought we did in a class, and then our professor did an essay on us. And so my transcript is 30 pages long, but I fit into that environment because I was accepting of diverse situations. I was at that time trying to learn about different people because I grew up in a very conservative, toxic environment. So I didn't know that throwing myself into that college would change my life. But now I don't use plastic bags at all, because back then I learned about alternatives to dairy products. I learned the environmental issues that we're facing today that I thought in 2021, it's been 10 years, would kind of be resolved, but unfortunately we're working on it. So those are kind of things that are really important. And I think that these issues can be worked on with the people that you were talking about in diversity, because they see a point of view that some of the leadership historically wasn't able to see, because they weren't different from each other by very much. And a lot of people default to, when I've been moving around a lot physically, a lot of people default to finding the people that are like them, whereas I find people that are different than me so that I can see a different perspective and learn something different from them. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So then the other question to go back in, and so we talked about some issues that are facing this sector. What are some things that you would like to see change, or how would you like the change to pan out?
I mean, definitely, touching upon that same theme that I, mentioned, diversity, inclusion, definitely getting some equity in there, making sure that people from disadvantaged, beginnings are able to have, get their foot in the door, and prove themselves, because I know that they will when they get the chance. So definitely that, and that I'm speaking, more to my field, but that applies generally across the board, obviously. I think too, here's something, it's kind of touching on the same theme, but I think this is forestry specific, and it definitely goes into any branch of field under forestry, is getting back to prioritizing Indigenous voices. I think, these were original stewards of the land, the first humans to make contact with North America. And, I definitely think that we certainly owe it to them to make sure that their voices are heard, but not just voices, not just a seat at the table, but the head of the table. So that's my personal view, and I think it's the just view, is that we need to see Indigenous people leading, and that really just comes down to non-Indigenous stepping down. That honestly. So I'm getting right to the heart of it, but that's my view is seeing the people that know best, not just from a Western scientific lens, but people who really have an intimate knowledge with the land, who are using scientific principles. Science is not just science is a process. It's not just a Western view. And the people who know the land best, really need to be leading it. And they're not going to do so unless they're enabled to do so, which really comes down to the people in power giving it up. So that's what I'd like to see.
So for our audience, I think Joe's really touching on a personality trait that comes from learning from a hard angle and learning things the hard way, which we have in our past. And I think that going into situations as an underdog and coming out on top is an adversity that people don't know is still happening today. And I really think that the change agent in Joe and we are on this podcast talking about changing the game in ways that are kind of seeming radical, but being that change agent just comes normal to us because of situations that we faced in the past, and we want to change history. So I think it really hits home when he says that. And also, I used to be a land steward with the Nisqually Land Trust, and I did 40 hours of volunteer experience to pay for the education that they gave me in 40 hours of class. And we worked directly with the Nisqually Native Americans, and we went to their property, we went to their fish weirs. We did so many things with them on the Puget Sound that model needs to be recreated. And what I'm hearing from Joe could even be better if the head of that program, the land steward program, was Indigenous.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it's, I think I forget sometimes, how radical some of these views are. I think, the reason for that is because, in talking about safe spaces, I mean, like, I guess I carry that around where I feel, as a very privileged person, it's safe for me to say that, I mean,
Yeah.
and plus I'm not head of any society. I'm not head of an organization. I'm not representing anybody but myself. So I really don't have any skin in the game, to lose or to get bruised. So I know that with that, I feel like that's where I can use my platform, to be helpful. But I do realize it's a pretty radical view to, people in forestry sometimes. But yeah, the nice thing is I can say it.
Yeah. So instead of them partnering with the program and offering us, time on their land, that they could be the head of that kind of program, which, right.
Yeah. And
the
partnerships are great. And
yeah.
we need to continue that for sure. But I definitely think, instead of just seeing it as there are, traditional, I mean, like, post-colonial methods, and those are the organizations like, I don't know, the forestry associations and stuff like that, partnerships need to continue for sure, but there's no reason why it has to be us and them. It can just, be people. And
Working together.
definitely I would like to see representation and from Indigenous people, not just restricted to their own reservation or their own lands, because all of this is their land.
It is. And the interesting thing about no skin in the game, that's what happens when you build your own platform. And what I've noticed with the boundaries I've been drawing the past 2 years is that people, whether personally know me or they know me because of my professional life, organizations have naturally been falling off out of my life because they were not aligning with that change. And I also, as you said, the skin in the game, to me, I was willing to give up my skin to try to change something where they weren't. And that didn't align with my mission and my belief. So naturally, we are either at an arm's length or, I just see them on social media now, and that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. You can still be civil and, cordial for sure.
Yeah. So my second to last question, so we're almost done. What activities are your favorite outside of school and work, since you are in your master's program?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, like, being where I am right now, surrounded by trees is always amazing. I love, just a little bit over that way, I've got hammocks, and I love that, swinging the kids in the hammocks, the kids swinging me in the hammocks. I love to travel. I haven't really gotten to travel much. Obviously, pandemic, has not been very good for traveling. But yeah, I mean, so a lot of things I love to do are like board sports. I skate. I'm not a very good skater, but I still do it. And I love snowboarding. That I'm like decent at. And I love to surf, not very good, but I like it so much. I love being in the ocean. So yeah, I mean, those are things that I love to do. Don't always have accessibility to them because I'm in landlocked Oklahoma. But yeah, like, I love going to New Mexico, Colorado, to mostly New Mexico is where I go to snowboard. Shout out to Angel Fire, New Mexico, is where I've been going for over 2 decades. I'm a woodworker. I do mostly like green woodworking, kind of odd woodworking, because I like tree rings. So like a lot of stuff is just like, maybe it'll be, like this is a lid to my water bottle. Maybe it'd be like something like this, but it's a piece of wood and I just sand it, or I carve it with a knife and axe carving, like stuff like that.
Therapeutic.
It's very therapeutic, and it's just so primal to me. It's like, we humans just like to make stuff, and some more than others, but I think we're all creating in our own way. An accountant, a finance person, they create every day with, in their trade. And a person who's a laborer creates in their trade. And I've done all sorts of different works, different trades, and we're all human, and we create in our own ways. And so yeah, I like trying to be creative in anything I do.
We all have that period of time in our life where we're just learning like what we want to do, and it's okay to do what Joe's talking about and just like go from trade to trade and figure out like what you truly want to do in life. That is so perfect that you talked about that, because that's exactly what I had to do. People can look at my resume and go, oh, she had 10 jobs, crazy. And it's like, well, no, I got experience to build a diverse profile, which now I'm utilizing in Talking Forest. There's things I did in separate offices in my career that I utilize today. Like my invoicing system is super old school, but it works. And I couldn't rely on merchant services in Germany, such as QuickBooks, Stripe, because I was in Germany. And it's so crazy. I tell people as a joke that I got cast on an island and, hardly got to talk to people because, well, we were 9 hours different at times, or 6 hours different. And it was,
there's geographic disadvantages for sure. I mean, you can definitely see that. I mean, America is such a powerhouse at a lot of industries for companies that, we rely on, and some of these are international, but they're not always friendly with every time zone and every geographic location. Yeah.
But now I know time zones like the back of my hand, and that's something
that's a new skill. Yeah.
I'm going to walk into a clientele or, have a client that needs it for some reason. And now I can be like, yeah, I understand how to do that. And actually, if you type into Google, this is a little hack. You can type in any time zone. So let's say 5 p.m. ET is the time zone that I'm in. I'm in Eastern time right now. But you want Mountain time, Pacific time, or Central time. And so all you have to do is do 5 p.m. ET and then press CT and press search, and it will automatically tell you what that time is in that time zone. And I had to do that for Greenwich Mean Time, Central European Summertime. It just saved me. And with our type of disabilities, the problem that we face is we're so intelligent in that we know information, but sometimes getting that information to be precise or to be consistent, even though that's our routine, we need it to be, sometimes we can get overloaded. And then, like you said, we can tick, and I'll tick on something really ridiculous and be like, whoa, for a normal person, like that process would have been much easier if it wasn't ticking in their brain. But now that I'm aware, I'm okay with that. And so I think we are very privileged that we get to work and play outside, and that has helped us. And what I'm excited about for you is that you're passing that on to your children. And so they get to touch, feel, sense, smell, and all those things that COVID took away from us, which I'm projecting that there's going to be more autism come out because of it being taken away from us. So we weren't able during COVID, the height of the pandemic, we weren't able to touch people. Our masks took away the sense of smell and taste for the most part. So those were things that I didn't know I needed until they got taken away.
Talking Forests is happy to have #ForestProud as an in-kind sponsor of the Talking Forest podcasts. What is Forest Proud? We are a community committed to making choices that keep forests as forests. We work at family businesses, forest product companies, conservation, recreation organizations, universities, and government agencies, and many of us have done so for generations. We are hikers, hunters, bikers, landowners, loggers, truck drivers, architects, researchers, foresters, students who work in and care about and share a passion for forests and forest products. The #ForestProud community is bigger than you might think. What does forest proud mean? It's a good question. Forest proud means different things for different people, and that's a good thing. We all have a part to play in making choices that keep our forests as forests and help make our neighborhoods, communities, and lives better. If you live, work, or play in the forests or with forest products, you're part of the Forest Proud community. ForestProud.org welcomes you.
So this is Forest Proud is an effort that I've been working with for a very long time, and they've been asking me to ask others what Forest Proud means to you personally.
Yeah, well, Forest Proud to me, it just means a sense of place, and it's not there for everybody all the time, unfortunately. Not everybody gets to be in the forest, but what I love is that for a lot of people, accessibility to a forest is not too far off, and that can take place in a city park, and yeah, I mean, there needs to be more. It needs to be more accessible for sure. But America, compared to a lot of other countries, at least, and America extending to Canada and the other Americas as well. But we have a lot of forest, and it is for the most part accessible. Not everywhere in the country, right? But in the countries, but you know, I am proud of being a local steward of my little patch of the cross timbers. You can see behind me, there's trees kind of scattered. It's kind of a woodland, and that's by design. That's kind of how I have it. And I like to plant native plants. There are a few that aren't, but those are chosen because they're not going to become invasive and they're managed. Yes. But yeah, so Forest Proud to me is getting in tune with nature, getting out in it, and kind of being a local steward where you can. That if that means getting out and planting some trees, volunteering, buying like a $2 loblolly pine seedling and putting it in the ground, that's being a good steward of the land. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think stewards of the land is definitely in their mission, and that's really important to continue that and help people understand that their city park or the green belt is literally steps away at times, and there's housing developments that are on preservation areas. So go out, try to find a trail, and get out, get into nature, so that way you can get in touch with a side of you that you may not have been able to see before. So it was an honor to have you on today, Joe. I'm so excited, and let people know now how they can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, well, I already increased Twitter stock earlier by talking about so much, but yeah, Twitter is great. It's at Joe Buck in Nature, spelled just like you would think, JoeBuck in nature. And yeah, there I'm on Instagram, and that's where you can kind of see a collection of tree ring photos and images that I post there at the same handle, at Joe Buck in Nature. I have a YouTube channel at Joe Buck in Nature, and that's where I put the fireside chats, which are similar to your format. Just getting to have just good conversations with people and meet some scientists and stuff, which I think can be really inspiring for the non-scientific community, as we kind of break down some of what they're about. Yeah, so that's how to get in touch. And yeah, send me a message, at me, whatever you got to do to get my attention. And I'm kind of prolific with my small following, in the sense that I will get back to you on Twitter eventually. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was really excited to see. Sometimes you also do some hobby photos of when you get like burls in that you're not quite sure what you're going to do with yet. But it's been super cool to see. And there are a lot of trees out there that are waterlogged and have been underwater for a very long time. And then what's super cool about Joe is they're a treasure to him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, if it's accessible, if I can find it, I mean, that carbon's going to stay sequestered. I'm going to make something out of it. And yeah, I love it. Yeah, my house is full of little wood knickknacks and stuff. So yeah, I love that stuff.
All right, well, that's awesome. And excited to see what you're doing, and we will keep in touch, and we're going to have some of these things in the show notes that we've shouted out to. So we will get this out, and hopefully our audience, is receptive and understanding. So we'll definitely have a great one, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Kendra. You too. It was a pleasure.